For as long as I've been a wrestling fan, one of the most common complaints I've heard about WWE is how often they use celebrities and outsiders, especially during Wrestlemania season. I've certainly felt that way at times too. And although I can understand people's frustrations when watching shows like Mania 2 or 11, for example, these days I don't think these complaints hold as much water, with folks like Pat McAfee, Bad Bunny, and Logan Paul killing it in the ring. When done right, celebrity involvement not only works, but it can be a lot of fun. And besides, that has literally been the special sauce for WWE's success since around the beginning of the Vince McMahon Jr. era. The seed, the germ, the very notion of WrestleMania and WWE as we know it would not exist were it not for a pop culture phenomenon that launched it into the national consciousness. As of this video, WWE is hotter than it's been in decades. Raw's on one of the world's most accessible streaming platforms in Netflix, monthly specials are back on NBC, its stars pop up in major movies and TV shows, and arenas are filling up once again. It's the end result of decades of trial and error, of highs and lows, of finally sloughing off the old management that was keeping them from fully entering a new era. But what we're experiencing now may not have even been possible if it weren't for a partnership born out of pure coincidence, a chance encounter taking place 40 years ago and thousands of feet above land. This week, we take a deep dive into the phenomenon that set the standard for success that WWE still follows today. This is the story of the Rock and Wrestling connection. Before we begin, though, be sure to subscribe to Wrestling with Regret and hit that bell icon to get all the updates for when I post more historical stuff like this. Let's begin. In order for Vince McMahon's plans of national expansion to work, the WWF needed to look beyond the limited scope of professional wrestling. It had to be embraced by the greater pop culture world, and when it was time to choose the face of that national movement, there was no better candidate at the time than Hulk Hogan. Before Hulkamania was a thing, Hogan was actually a baddie in the WWF in the late 70s and early 80s. Hard to believe that way back then, he got booed all the time on purpose. That all changed in 1981 when Vince McMahon Sr. fired Hogan for accepting the role of Thunderlips in Rocky III. But Hogan certainly didn't suffer, spending time in New Japan Pro Wrestling where he became the inaugural IWGP Heavyweight Champion, putting out a sweet EP in that country and also finding a home stateside with Verne Gagne's AWA. Even before Rocky III was released, Hogan's charisma and personality made him so irresistible to the fans that the AWA had no choice but to turn the career heel into a babyface. Then when the movie did come out in 1982, Hogan soared on the wings of that film's success and grew into one of the industry's most beloved stars. He became one of the first wrestlers to come out with entrance music and began to infiltrate the greater public sphere with talk show appearances. Hulk Hogan was a huge star in the world of wrestling even back then, but was missing one crucial element for his career to really skyrocket. And apparently that element was a promotion that actually invested in him. By the end of 1983, Hogan had soured on the American Wrestling Association. Despite unquestionably being their top draw, Gagne refused to put the world title on Hogan, part of his reasoning being that he lacked a legitimate wrestling background. Not only that, Gagne demanded a cut of Hulk's t-shirt sales, which didn't work for him, brother, and soon enough Double H left the company. Proving that most of Vince McMahon's success came from his competitors' mistakes, the WWF scooped up the hottest wrestler alive and hot-shotted him to the Heavyweight Championship on January 23, 1984.
History made in Madison Square Garden, and the fans on their feet.
While Vince Sr. and Verne Gagne were among those who were seemingly stuck in the past, there was one guy from the old guard who kept himself relevant and valuable to the WWF in the midst of this expansion. Captain Lou Albano was perhaps the wildest and most irreverent of the three wise men, the nickname for the company's most infamous managers of the 70s. It was one fateful day in early '84 on a plane ride from Puerto Rico when Albano met fellow passenger, rising pop star Cyndi Lauper. For all you younger kids watching this, think of a squeakier, more new wave Chappell Roan. Lauper had recently set the music world on fire with her hit debut album She's So Unusual, and while not a wrestling fan herself, she felt a kindred spirit in the captain. And it was that chance meeting between two loud and colorful individuals that would set in motion the most important crossover in wrestling history. With that, dear viewers, time for me to welcome an old friend of the channel, someone you have not seen here in a good while. Straight from the depths of hell, I'm talking about Captain Lou Albano.
Billy, Billy, Billy! Ooh, I felt so good, I felt so fine, I felt so elated meeting my good friend Cyndi Lauper up in that aeroplane. Her eyes were beautiful, her hair smelled like Vidal Sassoon. We shared things about each other, Billy, that most people never would. And the best thing about it, Billy, I only spit on her by mistake twice. Billy, Billy!
Thanks, Lou. It wasn't long before Albano was cast as Lauper's father in the music video for her iconic song, Girls Just Wanna Have Fun. This was a pretty big deal for the WWF. MTV was only a few years old by that point, but they had already made a tremendous impact on music, record sales, and pop culture at large. To have Captain Lou on the video for one of the most popular tunes at that time was a massive break.
Hey, now don't you forget, Billy, she also put me in the video for Time After Time.
Really? I didn't know that.
Hey, don't believe me? Take a look at this, Billy.
Sometimes you picture me.
Was that it?
That was it? Ah, that was a really fun week filming that scene.
A week? Why'd that take so long?
I kept eating the props.
This burgeoning partnership between Lauper and Albano was going to be hugely beneficial to both sides. Obviously, McMahon wanted to leverage Cyndi's involvement into something much larger. Meanwhile, Lauper's then manager and boyfriend, Dave Wolf, a wrestling fan since childhood, convinced Lauper that appearing on WWF TV would expose her to a whole new audience. The wheels were in motion in March of that year when Lauper appeared as a guest on The Tonight Show and put over her new friend Albano.
Now, you don't know about the PEG principle?
What's the PEG principle?
Well, it stands for politeness, etiquette, and grooming. And Captain Lou has come up with this concept.
Yes, Captain Lou, truly the paragon of politeness, etiquette, and grooming. But meanwhile in the Federation, not too long after the coronation of Hulk Hogan, another pivotal player in this story arrived on the scene. Roddy Piper, having spent the last 10 years tearing it up in the territories, debuted for the WWF in '84, not as a wrestler, but as the manager of Paul Orndorff and David Schultz. I have a feeling that if social media were around back then, fans would have been furious at that. Wanting to break out of the box, Piper suggested he take over Buddy Rogers' stodgy Victory Corner segment and shape it into his own creation. Hence the birth of Piper's Pit, the interview show to inspire all other interview shows. The show became an instant highlight of WWF programming, as Roddy's unique mix of wit and rancor made him impossible to ignore, badgering and berating his guests on a weekly basis. The Pit was the perfect setting to transition Lauper from the world of music to the WWF. It started in May when Albano appeared weekly to put himself over for allegedly launching Lauper's career and to take all the credit for her achievements.
Took her from 70 to 60 to 50 to 40, 49 and a half down to a -1, right back to #1.
For weeks, Albano would promise to bring Cyndi to the show, only to stumble through an excuse when she didn't appear. Wolf even showed up one week, no doubt a form of wish fulfillment, to refute Albano's claims and promised that he would be the one to bring Lauper onto the show.
If Cyndi Lauper comes on this show with that geek there, I'll be more than surprised. I will give you a kiss and 10 minutes to draw a crowd.
Yeah, you tell him, buddy. Finally, on a June edition of The Pit, the unusual one made her on-screen debut. After some lighthearted questions about her travels and her hair, she politely cleared the air about her and Captain Lou.
I love Lou, but he's not my manager. A lot of people think that.
This sent Albano into a tizzy as he stormed the set and acted like a complete prick to Lauper in response. The pop star stayed cool under pressure until he made the fateful mistake of calling her a broad.
Broad hanging around
What?
Things heated up the following week when Piper visited Lauper in her recording studio, and I guess it was just wacky sunglasses day at the building. It was here that Lauper threw down the gauntlet and challenged Albano to a managerial face-off.
And I'll show you that you know nothing about music and even less about wrestling, fatso.
The two made their selections. Albano chose longtime women's champion and alleged pimp, the fabulous Moolah, and Lauper threw her support behind Moolah trainee Wendy Richter. The stage was set for July 23rd at Madison Square Garden. Airing on MTV, they called it the Brawl to End It All, a blatant case of false advertising if ever there was one. And they went all out in promoting this matchup. Lou Albano made a guest appearance on David Letterman, and of course, MTV threw their muscle behind the bout as well.
Hey, you skinny little geek! I can do it right here, but I don't have to tell you. Thanks to nobody.
6 months to the day after Hogan's big title win, the show featured a full card for the MSG crowd, though only the Women's Championship match aired on MTV. Hulk Hogan defended the WWF title against Greg Valentine, while Samoans Afa and Sika wrestled in separate singles matches, and Antonio Inoki defended the martial arts title against Kenny Bob Fulton. But what everyone came to see was the Women's Championship match. The image of Lauper and Richter running out to Girls Just Want to Have Fun, Captain Lou selling it like the music was piercing into his soul, it was a great moment. The ballyhooed match delivered exactly what you might expect from a 61-year-old woman and her young protege. Cheap shots and hair mares aplenty. The biggest high spot came when Moolah got hung upside down in the ropes, which had to have been the 80s female wrestling equivalent of Sting diving off a balcony into a pile of tables. Lauper got a shot in on Moolah right in front of the referee. Then later, Albano tried the same thing, but it looks like they screwed it up somehow. The match ended with Wendy getting her shoulder up at the last minute on a roll-up, leading to Richter actually winning the match. Moolah refused to leave the ring to let Wendy and Cyndi have their moment, but she did dropkick the referee in protest, which was actually pretty funny.
Cindy's gave me inspiration. She showed me how to put on makeup, showed me new dress styles, everything.
Taught you how to put on makeup? Who are you, Sissy Spacek and Carrie? The match may not have been spectacular, but it generated the highest ratings MTV had ever seen by that point. And let's be honest, for a women's match to get this much attention in '84, even over the vaunted Hulk Hogan, was pretty special for all involved. The show was a huge victory and made MTV even more eager to work with the WWF in the future. This was a much-needed boost for the Federation, as the Brawl to End It All took place just 9 days after the infamous Black Saturday, when Vince McMahon bought controlling interest in Georgia Championship Wrestling and took over the NWA's time slot on Ted Turner's TBS, although it further expanded the WWF's television reach, replacing the gritty wrestling that fans had come to expect with the more outlandish and cartoony style of the Federation proved disastrous for ratings almost instantly. In a rare setback for McMahon during this time period, he eventually sold the time slot to Jim Crockett Promotions for a cool $1 million, bringing NWA Wrestling back to the Superstation. And with that, after almost 12 years of doing this channel, that is officially the most I've talked about Black Saturday. So, good for me. Lauper couldn't be on WWF TV every week, but her star power definitely rubbed off on Richter, who had become the #2 babyface in the company behind Hulk Hogan, and certainly the most popular women's wrestler in America since the days of Mildred Burke. By December of '84, it was announced that Lauper would at long last return to Madison Square Garden to receive an Achievement Award, and Piper wasn't having it.
She's going to give an award to the WWF because the WWF is giving her an award for being Achievement Award for bringing Cyndi Lauper, is bringing Wendy Richter along, and everybody's kissing everybody.
It was clear from the captain's body language that he didn't seem to approve of Piper's message, and then on the 28th, in a shocking about-face, Lauper turned around and awarded her old rival Albano for his work raising money for multiple sclerosis. And to say the fans were a bit confused is an understatement.
Billy, how could they boo me? I was only a bad guy because I had brain damage.
Well, that goes without saying.
No, you don't understand, Billy. It was the calcification of the medulla oblongata. They gave me electroshock treatment to turn me face again, Billy. It's the same thing I did to George Steele in '86.
Oh, really? I never knew that detail.
Yep, and no adverse side effects. Hey, did I tell you I got brain damage?
Let's move on. An incensed Roddy Piper reminded fans who to boo when he blasted Albano with the award, kicked Lauper off Albano, then slammed David Wolf for good measure. And while the sight of a famous pop star being physically assaulted by a heel wrestler was certainly interesting, it was far from the only newsworthy event to take place that night in Madison Square Garden.
You think it's fake?
With wrestling becoming all the rage, 2020 reporter John Stossel did an investigative piece on the world of the Graps, which featured enhancement talent Eddie Mansfield completely exposing the business by revealing how wrestlers bumped and bladed, outpacing NBC by more than a decade.
Wrestling basic number 1, the body slam. But there's still more props in the wrestler's bag of tricks. Wrestling fans have been tricked again.
In search of additional perspective, Stossel went backstage to the WWF event looking for answers. With the whole locker room aware of what he was up to, Dr. D. David Schultz was the one selected to talk to the reporter. Schultz was a cantankerous future bounty hunter who basically had the personality of Stone Cold Steve Austin if he were a real-life person and not a wrestling character. And in the spirit of protecting the business, he decided to show Stossel what wrestling was all about.
What the hell's wrong with you? That's open hand slap, huh? You think it's safe to come? Huh?
Dr. D may have scored some points with the boys, but in this case, not all publicity was good publicity. Stossel suffered a ruptured eardrum and sued the WWF, leading to a settlement and Schultz's firing. Regardless, the big crossover storyline had been kicked into high gear, setting things up for another Garden event in February titled The War to Settle the Score. Similar to the Brawl to End It All, MTV aired only one match, the world title affair between Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper. Okay, they fooled us once before. But this time, I mean, come on, the war to settle the score. That's got to give us some resolution, right?
It's pandemonium! Mr. T and Hulk are fit to be tied!
For a small fee on March 31st. This show did a lot of setting up for the first ever WrestleMania. Not only did we see Mr. T come out to help the Hulkster, the fabulous Moolah got some revenge by throttling Cyndi Lauper and helping Leilani Kai beat Wendy Richter for the women's title. This show also got some fabulous celebrity endorsements, as guys like Joe Piscopo, Danny DeVito, and even iconic artist Andy Warhol would wander into the locker room to sing the company's praises. This helped establish that the Federation was real happening stuff.
Your impressions of what took place earlier on here?
Oh, I'm speechless. It's just so exciting, I just don't know what to say.
Your impressions of the Rock and wrestling connection. Don't you think that they got together tonight here and band together and stood on firm ground?
It's the best I've ever seen in my whole life. Most exciting thing.
Well, he was an artist, not a wordsmith. And say, why didn't MTV air the women's match? Did they not want to show off Cyndi Lauper some more? Oh wait, never mind. She and Wolf came out with Albano to accompany Hogan to the ring for the main event. Wow, talk about scooping someone's heat, Terry. The next 6 weeks saw the WWF on fire like they'd never been before, as WrestleMania fever wove its way through pop culture. Hulk Hogan and Mr. T made tons of media appearances to help promote the event, but perhaps none were more infamous or memorable than on Hot Properties, a late-night talk show hosted by comedian Richard Belzer. In an unfortunate callback to the John Stossel incident, Hogan accidentally choked out Belzer while demonstrating a front chin lock. Then Belzer fell, smacked the back of his head on the hard studio floor, and busted himself open hard way. Belzer was obviously concussed, as he was knocked out for several seconds before leaping back up and tossing to commercial.
And now, we'll be right back after this word from you-know-who. We'll be right back.
No, Richard. Jim Neidhart wouldn't play Who for another 11 years. Sit down, man. You need some rest. Belzer ended up suing Hogan and the Federation for a handsome sum, but don't cry for the Hulkster, because he got his heat back by making a Belzer lookalike shit his pants in No Holds Barred.
What's that smell?
And you gotta know that David Schultz was pissed about that. Hogan didn't even get a slap on the wrist, and that was on live TV. It seems that our heroes are racking up a lot of unnecessary costs due to reckless behavior all before Mania could even freaking happen. But you can't ask for a better go-home show than what they got on the March 30th episode of Saturday Night Live, just one night before WrestleMania. According to legend, the original host had to back out last minute, so Hogan and Mr. T were picked to fill in. Unlike the typical SNL formula, these guest hosts didn't interact much with the cast outside of the cold open and a hilarious edition of Fernando's Hideaway, where these two huge imposing guys broke into an uncontrollable giggle fit.
I was at a Hollywood party where this was an hors d'oeuvre, if you know what I'm saying to you. You know, when you laugh, your little things there go bambi, 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 bambi.
Wow, even when the show was at its lowest point, being on SNL was still a pretty big deal. Finally came the big enchilada itself, the inaugural Wrestlemania. With Cyndi Lauper in her corner, Wendi Richter regained the women's title, and Hogan and Mr. T beat Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff in the main event. I won't go into all the other details here, but with its combination of high-octane action, glitzy presentation, and copious celebrity involvement, it was an unprecedented win for the WWF, validation that what they were doing was indeed working. As the story goes, the Federation needed WrestleMania to be a success, or the company as we know it would be done for. But there at least had to be some small comfort in knowing that a large portion of those expenses were already covered by that $1 million payment from Jim Crockett Promotions. Of course, the WWF's goal of national expansion became fully realized after the success of WrestleMania, an event that remains an annual institution 40 years later as the company continues to be the market leader for wrestling in America. The triumph of the Rock and Wrestling Connection gave way to Hulk Hogan's very own Saturday morning cartoon, the wrestling albums, No Holds Barred, the Slammies, all that good stuff. But as with any big accomplishment, there's bound to be some fallout. The relationship between the WWF and MTV crumbled soon after Mania, once the network suggested they deserved a cut of the box office of future co-promoted events. Luckily for Vince McMahon, he had a popular, more hotter suitor in the form of NBC, and they quickly pivoted to putting on Saturday night's main event. After a wave of music videos involving wrestlers like She Bop and Goonies Are Good Enough, Cyndi Lauper distanced herself from the WWF, which was probably good for her career in the long run. In fact, she never appeared on a wrestling show again until an episode of Raw in 2012, when she and Roddy Piper got to recreate the infamous award-smashing moment with Heath Slater. And yes, she absolutely deserves a spot in the WWE Hall of Fame, but considering Lauper's counterculture stance on many things, being in any Hall of Fame seems like something she'd be against, but never say never, I guess. But what of the woman she managed? Wendi Richter finally got her Hall of Fame due in 2010, but after the events of WrestleMania 1, her career did not see nearly the same level of success as her male counterpart in Hulk Hogan. After rightly asking for a pay increase for her contributions to the company, she became a victim of the original screw job when Vince McMahon sent out the fabulous Moolah in disguise as the Spider, who pulled a fast one on Wendi, embarrassing her and driving her from the company. The Rock and Wrestling Connection was the spark that set off a huge boom period for the World Wrestling Federation and set the tone for everything the company has done ever since. Celebrities are woven into WWE's DNA, and as much as we like to complain that it takes away from the wrestling, oftentimes that is precisely by design. But just think about how different all of this would be right now if Lou Albano and Cyndi Lauper did not meet on that plane. Everything after that, the MTV partnership, WrestleMania, the NBC partnership, none of that would have happened if these two had not met. And sure, Hulk Hogan is WWF champion, that would have taken the company pretty far in terms of national expansion, but without this celebrity involvement, their odds for the company's long-term success would have been much lower.
And don't forget about me, Billy. If it wasn't for me meeting Cyndi Lauper on that aeroplane, the WWF would be gone. Zip, zilch, nada. It had the brain of a dehydrated baby. It'd be as good as a prefabricated dog biscuit.
Yes, Lou, I literally gave you credit for that a second ago.
Ooh, my fault, my bad, my mistake, Billy. Did I tell you I got brain damage? Everybody, do the Mario. Swing your arms from side to side. Come on, it's time to go. Do the Mario.
Thanks for watching, everyone. What were your favorite moments of the Rock and Wrestling Connection? Let me know in the comments section. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.